Еще до спокеристи дни стеменят и всюгут нам сыпывыц, и витень симный нос кральнес. И дни смайте следи балыстойный раздевистовный.
The alarm didn't just buzz. It screamed, tearing Daniel Brooks from a dream he couldn't remember into a reality he knew all too well. Chaos. Pure, unadulterated chaos. He was late. Again, his eyes, heavy and rimmed with the red of too few hours of sleep, scanned the bedroom floor. A minefield of discarded clothes, half-finished projects, and the occasional rogue Lego piece lay in wait. This was the landscape of his life, a single father trying to build an empire from the ruins of a broken home. Today wasn't just another day, today was the day of the merger presentation. The culmination of months of sleepless nights, fueled by stale coffee and the quiet desperation of a man running on fumes. A career-defining moment was just hours away. But first, a more pressing matter. Breakfast for his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. He found her in the kitchen, a tiny general commanding her army of stuffed animals. "Daddy, Mr. Snuggles, is hungry for pancakes." Her voice, bright and clear as a morning bell, cut through his exhaustion. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his tired eyes. For her, he could conquer anything, even the lumpy pancake batter that seemed to mock his culinary skills. Juggling a spatula, a juice box, and a flurry of questions about why squirrels don't wear hats, Daniel managed to get them both fed and dressed. He glanced at his reflection in the hallway mirror. His suit was sharp, but his tie was crooked, a stubborn knot refusing to sit straight. He sighed. It was a perfect metaphor for his life, a constant, frantic effort to keep everything from unraveling. A life held together by sheer will, not by grace or ease. He straightened it for the 5th time, there, almost presentable. Almost like a man who had it all together. Almost like a man ready to stand before the board of Halle Industries and its formidable CEO, Victoria Halle. Victoria Halle. The name alone sent a ripple of anxiety through the corporate world. She was a legend, a titan of industry who had built her empire from the ground up. She was known for her sharp intellect, her even sharper tongue, and an uncanny ability to spot weakness from a mile away. Today, she would be in the room, her piercing gaze evaluating every word, every slide, every slight hesitation. For Daniel, this presentation wasn't just about a merger. It was about securing his future and, more importantly, Lily's. Dropping Lily off at school was the usual whirlwind of last-minute hugs, forgotten permission slips, and a final whispered, "I love you, Daddy." As he watched her skip into the schoolyard, a pang of guilt hit him. Was he doing enough? Was this relentless pursuit of a career worth the moments he was missing? He pushed the thought away. This was for her. It had to be. Back in the car, the city traffic was a symphony of blaring horns and frustrated drivers. Each red light felt like a personal affront, a tick of the clock counting down to his potential failure. He ran through the presentation in his head, the numbers and projections a familiar mantra. He knew the material inside and out. He'd built the entire strategy, meticulously crafting every argument. But knowledge was only half the battle. Today, he needed to project an aura of unshakable confidence he simply didn't feel. He finally pulled into the towering glass and steel monolith of Halle Industries, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The lobby was a cathedral of corporate power, all gleaming marble and hushed, reverent tones. He felt small, an imposter in a land of giants. He saw his reflection in the polished elevator doors. The crooked tie was back, a tiny, defiant symbol of his inner turmoil. He yanked it straight with a frustrated tug. The boardroom on the 40th floor offered a panoramic view of the city, but Daniel barely noticed. The long, polished table was already lined with faces, some familiar, some not. All of them looked impossibly composed, and then at the head of the table, she sat. Victoria Halle, she was exactly as the stories described her. Impeccably dressed, her posture radiating a quiet, intimidating power. Her eyes, cool and analytical, were already scanning the room. As Daniel set up his laptop, his hands felt slick with sweat. He fumbled with the cable, a simple task that suddenly felt as complex as brain surgery. He could feel Victoria's gaze on him, and he imagined her judgment, her dismissal. He can't even connect a laptop, he imagined her thinking. How can he possibly handle a multi-billion-dollar merger? He took a deep breath, the air in the climate-controlled room feeling thin and insufficient. He thought of Lily, of her bright, trusting face. He thought of the pancakes, the juice box, the crook tie. This wasn't just about a merger. It was about proving to himself, more than anyone, that he wasn't just a man on the brink of collapse. He was a father fighting for his daughter's future. He was a professional who had poured his soul into this work. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. Victoria Halle nodded, a silent command to begin. "Good morning," Daniel started, his voice a little shakier than he would have liked. He cleared his throat and looked up, not at his screen, but directly at the faces around the table, his gaze finally landing on Victoria. He remembered a piece of advice an old mentor had given him. Authenticity is your greatest asset. Don't sell them a product, sell them your conviction. And in that moment, something shifted. He wasn't just Daniel Brooks, the overwhelmed single dad with the perpetually crooked tie. He was Daniel Brooks, the architect of a brilliant strategy, a man who believed in his vision with every fiber of his being. He straightened his shoulders, and for the first time that day, the tie felt like it was finally in its rightful place. He began to speak, his voice gaining strength and clarity with every word. Ready to fight the most important battle of his career, the morning on the brink was over. The fight had just begun. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the otherwise silent, cavernous lobby of Sterling Enterprises. This was it, the meeting that could make or break his career. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, the silk feeling more like a noose with each passing second. He was here to meet the new CEO, a figure spoken of in hushed, almost mythical tones around the city. Some said she was brilliant, others ruthless. All agreed she was an enigma. Daniel took a deep, steadying breath, catching his reflection in the polished marble floor. He looked the part, at least. Sharp suit, determined expression. But inside, he was a bundle of nerves. The elevator dinged, and out stepped a woman who commanded the space with a single glance. She wasn't what he expected. No severe business suit, but an elegant, form-fitting dress that spoke of quiet power. Her hair was pulled back, accentuating features that were both sharp and striking. This had to be her. Victoria Sterling. She walked directly toward him, her heels clicking a confident rhythm on the marble. Daniel straightened, extending his hand, ready to deliver his practiced, professional greeting. But she didn't take his hand. Instead, she closed the distance between them, stepping into his personal space with an audacity that stole his breath. He could smell her perfume, a subtle, intoxicating scent of jasmine and something else he couldn't quite place. Her eyes, a startling shade of green, met his. Then her gaze dropped to his chest. Before he could react, her slender fingers were on his tie. He froze, every muscle in his body tensing. She deftly, expertly adjusted the knot, her touch light but firm. It was an impossibly intimate gesture for a first meeting, for any meeting in a corporate lobby. The air crackled around them. He could feel the eyes of the receptionist on his back, but he couldn't look away from Victoria. Her fingers lingered for a fraction of a second on the knot, sending a jolt straight through him. The whole world seemed to shrink down to this tiny space between them, filled with unspoken tension. She finally lifted her gaze back to his, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. She was so close he could see the tiny flecks of gold in her green eyes. He realized he'd been staring, completely captivated, his mouth slightly agape. She leaned in even closer, her lips brushing against his ear. The warmth of her breath sent shivers down his spine. "It's rude to stare so intensely, Mr. Collins," she whispered, her voice a low, velvety murmur that was both a reprimand and a promise. "But I'll let it slide. This time." And just like that, she stepped back, the invisible current between them breaking. She was all business again, her expression cool and composed, as if nothing had happened. "My office." "Now," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. She turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing in the middle of the lobby, utterly shaken. His face burned with embarrassment, yet a strange, undeniable thrill coursed through him. This wasn't just a business meeting anymore. He had a feeling his life had just been turned completely upside down by the CEO who stepped far too close. What happens when the lines between professional and personal are not just blurred but completely shattered on day one? Victoria isn't just his new boss. She's a puzzle he's suddenly desperate to solve. And Daniel is about to find out that playing her game comes with risks he never could have imagined. If you want to see what happens next in this intense corporate saga, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a single moment. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter. The spotlight felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, each one a tiny pinprick of judgment. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, and my palms were slick with sweat. In that blinding glare, my meticulously prepared slides seemed to blur into an incomprehensible mess. My voice, when it finally came out, was a weak, trembling thing I barely recognized as my own. The first few minutes were a disaster, a train wreck in slow motion. I stumbled over words, lost my place, and felt the familiar, cold dread of failure creeping in. This was it. This was the moment everyone would see me for the fraud I felt I was. Then my eyes caught hers. Victoria, she was sitting in the third row, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her stillness, a quiet intensity that cut through the noise in my head. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't impatience, it was attention. Pure, undivided attention. It was as if she was the only one in the room, and suddenly the room didn't feel so big anymore. In that single, fleeting glance, something shifted. The panic didn't vanish, but it receded like a wave pulling back from the shore. A tiny, defiant spark ignited within me. No, not like this. I wouldn't let this be my story. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the air fill my lungs. I squared my shoulders, planted my feet firmly on the stage, and looked out at the audience again. But this time, I wasn't looking at a faceless mob of critics. I was looking at people. People who had given me their time, people who were here to learn something. I owed them more than this stuttering, frightened version of myself. I owed them the passion and the knowledge that had brought me here in the first place. I owed it to myself. I clicked to the next slide, my hand steady this time. The image that appeared was one I knew intimately, the core of my research. Let's pause for a moment, I said, my voice clearer now, stronger. Forget the jargon and the complex data for a second. Let me tell you a story. And I did. I abandoned the rigid script I had memorized and started speaking from the heart. I talked about the late nights in the lab, the frustrating dead ends, and the sudden, exhilarating breakthroughs. I shared the human element behind the numbers, the passion that drove the project forward. The words started to flow, not because I had memorized them, but because I believed in them. I could feel the energy in the room changing. The rustling stopped. People leaned forward. They weren't just listening to a presentation anymore. They were connecting with a narrative. Every so often my gaze would find its way back to Victoria. Her expression was still composed, but I could see a subtle change. A slight nod here, a faint curve of her lips there. She wasn't just watching my performance. She seemed to be seeing past it, past the polished slides and the corporate buzzwords. It felt like she was seeing me, the person who had poured his soul into this work. Her quiet approval was more validating than a round of applause. It was a silent conversation, an acknowledgement that she understood not just what I was saying, but why it mattered so much to me. It fueled me, giving me a sense of calm and control I hadn't felt all day. As I moved through the rest of my presentation, I felt a new sense of command. I wasn't just reciting facts, I was leading a discussion. I started engaging with the audience, asking them questions, making them part of the journey. When a challenging question came from the back of the room, I didn't flinch. I welcomed it, seeing it not as an attack, but as an opportunity. I answered with honesty and integrity, admitting what I didn't know and confidently explaining what I did. The pressure was still there, but it had transformed. It was no longer a weight crushing me, but a force propelling me forward, sharpening my focus. I continued to feel Victoria's presence, a steady anchor in the sea of faces. Her focused gaze was a constant reminder of why I was up there. It wasn't just about impressing the board or securing funding. It was about sharing a piece of myself, about communicating an idea with clarity and conviction. I realized that true performance isn't about being flawless. It's about being authentic. It's about letting your genuine passion shine through, even when you're terrified. Her perception of me, I sensed, was changing from a colleague to something more. She was seeing the man behind the professional mask, the one who fought back against his own fear and found his voice when it mattered most. When I delivered my final slide, a powerful silence filled the room. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a contemplative one. I had taken them on a journey, and we had arrived at the destination together. I ended not with a whimper, but with a statement of quiet confidence. "Thank you," I said, my voice even and strong. The applause that followed was thunderous, genuine. It washed over me, a wave of warmth and relief. But as I scanned the crowd, my eyes sought out only one person, Victoria. She was clapping, just like everyone else. But as our eyes met one last time across the crowded room, she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. And in that nod I saw everything. It wasn't just professional approval, it was respect, it was understanding. It was the unmistakable acknowledgement of a shared experience, even though she had been in the audience and I had been on stage. It was the quiet, profound recognition of one person truly seeing another. In that moment I knew this presentation was more than just a career milestone. It was the beginning of something new, something far more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. The pressure had forged something stronger than just a successful performance. It had forged a connection. And as I walked off that stage, the applause still ringing in my ears, I wasn't thinking about the data or the projections. I was thinking about her smile and the quiet promise of what might come next. The perception that mattered most had been the one I had earned. Not through perfection, but through vulnerability and strength. That, I knew, was a far greater victory. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. See you next time. Victoria's invitation was a surprise. An unscheduled lunch, she'd said, off the record. Daniel had hesitated, but something in her tone, a hint of something beyond their usual professional friction, made him agree. He found her at a small cafe tucked away on a side street, far from the prying eyes of their colleagues. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and quiet conversation. She was already there, nursing a black coffee, a stark contrast to the sugary lattes he'd imagined she'd prefer. "Daniel, thanks for coming," she said, her voice softer than he was used to. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "I thought it was time we talked, properly." He sat down, a sense of unease settling over him. This was uncharted territory. Their interactions were usually confined to boardrooms, filled with strategic maneuvering and veiled critiques. Here, without the armor of their corporate roles, they were just two people. The waiter came and went, leaving them with their coffees and a plate of pastries that neither of them touched. For a few moments, they sat in a charged silence, the clinking of spoons against ceramic the only sound. "So," Daniel began, breaking the quiet, "what's this about, Victoria?" "If it's about the quarterly reports, I can assure you my team is on track." She offered a small, almost sad smile. "It's not about the reports, Daniel. It's not about work at all." She looked out the window, her gaze distant. "I wanted to understand. You seem burdened." More than usual, the directness of her observation caught him off guard. He had been feeling the weight, the immense pressure of his responsibilities, especially with Noah. His son was everything to him, and the fear of failing him was a constant, heavy cloak. He found himself speaking before he could stop the words. "It's my son, Noah. He's at that age where the world is both a playground and a battlefield. I worry I'm not giving him what he needs, that I'm so focused on providing for him that I'm not present for him." The confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. He hadn't meant to share so much, especially not with her. Victoria listened, her expression unreadable at first. Then her features softened with an empathy he'd never seen before. "I understand that weight," she said quietly. "The feeling that you're carrying the world on your shoulders, and if you stumble, everything comes crashing down." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes meeting his over the rim of the cup. "People look at me and they see the title, the power, the perfection. They assume I have it all figured out, that my life is a seamless series of victories." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "The truth is, it's lonely. Leadership is lonely. Every decision is scrutinized. Every weakness is a potential weapon for someone else. They don't see the sleepless nights, the second guessing, the constant fear of making the wrong call that could affect hundreds of lives. Her own vulnerability was a mirror to his. He saw past the powerful CEO, the formidable rival, and glimpsed the person underneath. A person who, like him, was just trying to navigate the complexities of life. "I never thought of it that way," Daniel admitted, his voice low. "I always saw you as unshakable." "No one is unshakable, Daniel," she replied. "We just get better at hiding the cracks." A new kind of understanding began to form between them, delicate but tangible. It wasn't friendship. Not yet. It was something more elemental, a shared recognition of their common humanity, hidden beneath layers of professional rivalry and personal assumptions. The air between them was still charged, but the tension had transformed from adversarial to something else. A restrained acknowledgement of a connection they never knew existed. Over the next hour they talked, really talked. Not as competitors, but as two people sharing the burdens they carried. Daniel spoke of Noah's latest school project, the pride and anxiety tangled together. Victoria shared a story about her early career, a mistake that had almost cost her everything but had ultimately taught her resilience. The barriers they had so carefully constructed around themselves began to dissolve, chipped away by shared vulnerability. The coffee grew cold, the pastries remained untouched, but they were nourishing something far more important, a mutual respect. When they finally left the cafe, the afternoon sun seemed warmer. "Thank you, Victoria," Daniel said, the words feeling inadequate. "For lunch, for this." She simply nodded, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time. "Off the record, Daniel." As he walked away, Daniel felt a little lighter. The weight on his shoulders was still there, but he no longer felt like he was carrying it entirely alone. And he had a feeling Victoria felt the same. Their professional lives would continue, the challenges and competition would remain, but something fundamental had shifted. An unscheduled lunch had redrawn the map of their relationship, revealing a common ground he never expected to find. The city felt different, less like a battleground and more like a place where unexpected allies could be found in the most unlikely of places. It all started with a simple project meeting, just another Tuesday in the bustling world of corporate strategy. But something was different this time. Daniel, the CEO, a man who navigated billion-dollar deals with an unnerving calm, found his attention drifting. It wasn't the spreadsheets or the market projections that held him captive. It was Victoria. She was a junior analyst, sharp and insightful, but it was the way she articulated her ideas, the quiet confidence in her eyes, that made him lean in a little closer. He found himself asking questions he already knew the answers to, just to hear her speak again. For Victoria, it was just another high-stakes meeting. Daniel was the CEO, a figure more myth than man, someone you tried your best to impress and then promptly forgot about. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling of his focused gaze. It wasn't intimidating as she'd expected, it was curious. He listened, truly listened, to her every word, a rarity in a room full of people eager to speak. That first meeting ended, but it was far from the end. It was the beginning of a subtle, unspoken current flowing between them. The professional barrier started to show its first tiny cracks. A follow-up email about the project from Daniel landed in her inbox late that evening. She expected a brief, formal note. Instead, he had added a line at the end. "Your point about emerging market saturation was particularly brilliant. It's given me a lot to think about." Victoria's heart skipped a beat. Praise from the CEO wasn't unheard of, but this felt different. It was personal. She crafted a reply, professional yet warm, and hit send, a strange mix of exhilaration and anxiety swirling within her. This exchange became their new normal. Emails about work would bleed into discussions about books, about the best place for coffee near the office, about the struggles of long-haul travel. Each message was a small, carefully placed stone, building a bridge across the vast corporate chasm that separated them. He was no longer just the CEO, and she was no longer just the analyst. They were Daniel and Victoria, two minds that had found a surprising and exhilarating connection. Then came the phone calls. What began as quick 5-minute check-ins about project milestones soon stretched into hour-long conversations after everyone else had left the office. The city lights would twinkle outside their respective windows, a silent audience to their evolving dynamic. They'd start by dissecting a competitor's strategy, but inevitably the conversation would meander. He'd ask about her weekend plans, and she'd find herself asking about the pressures he faced, the side of being a CEO no one ever saw. One night, he confessed his exhaustion, the sheer loneliness of being at the top. It was a moment of vulnerability she never expected. In that moment, he wasn't the powerful executive from the company posters. He was just a man, tired and seeking a genuine connection. Victoria, in turn, shared her own fears and ambitions, things she hadn't even told her closest friends. The phone calls became a sanctuary, a private world where the titles of CEO and employee were left at the door, and all that remained were two people talking, listening, and slowly, irrevocably drawing closer in the quiet hum of the late-night city. The change was subtle, almost imperceptible to the outside world, but for Daniel and Victoria, it was everything. He started remembering things, small details she'd mentioned in passing. One morning, a coffee appeared on her desk, the exact oat milk latte with an extra shot Dee once said was her secret weapon for tough deadlines. A note was tucked beside it, simply saying, "For the final push." Dee, her colleagues assumed it was a nice gesture from a manager. Victoria knew it was more. She, in turn, noticed the weariness in his eyes during a board presentation and sent him a brief email afterward, not about work, but with a link to a classical music piece she found calming, with the message, "Thought you might appreciate this." He replied almost instantly, "I did." More than you know, these small acts of noticing, of remembering, were their secret language. It was a language of care and attention that transcended the corporate hierarchy. Trust, the most valuable currency of all, was being built, not in grand gestures, but in these quiet, shared moments. The professional distance between them wasn't just blurring. It was dissolving molecule by molecule, with every remembered detail and every thoughtful gesture. The office, once a sterile environment of deadlines and hierarchies, had transformed. For Daniel and Victoria, it was now a stage for their clandestine connection. A shared glance across a crowded conference room could convey more than a half-hour meeting. A brief, accidental brush of hands as he passed her a document would send a jolt through both of them, a silent acknowledgement of the electricity that now crackled in the air between them. Daniel found himself engineering reasons to walk by her department, hoping for a chance to see her smile. Victoria would feel a flutter of anticipation every time her email notification chimed, wondering if it was from him. Their colleagues remained oblivious, caught up in their own work. But a few of the more observant ones might have noticed a new lightness in the CEO's step, or a brighter, more confident glow around the young analyst. The line between boss and employee had been crossed so many times in their late-night calls and personal emails that it had now all but vanished. The only line that mattered was the invisible, magnetic one that pulled them together, a force growing stronger and more undeniable with each passing day, promising a future that was both terrifying and thrilling. One rainy Thursday, the project they had been working on so intensely finally concluded with a major success. A celebration was in order. The entire team went out for drinks at a noisy, crowded bar downtown. The atmosphere was loud and cheerful, but Daniel and Victoria found themselves in their own quiet bubble. He watched her across the table, laughing with her colleagues, and felt a powerful surge of pride and something much deeper, something he could no longer label as simple admiration. Later, as the crowd thinned, they found themselves standing outside under the awning, the rain pattering softly around them. The usual barrier of the office, the team, the noise, was gone. "You were incredible on this, Victoria," he said, his voice low. "We couldn't have done it without you." She looked up at him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "We made a good team," she replied softly. The space between them felt charged, filled with all the words they hadn't said over countless emails and phone calls. He took a small step closer. The line had not just blurred. It had been erased completely. And in that rainy city night, a new story, one far more complex and personal than any business project, was about to begin. The question was no longer about corporate strategy, but about what they would dare to build next, together. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you're as invested in Daniel and Victoria's journey as we are, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss the next chapter. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think will happen next. See you in the next video. The fluorescent lights of the office hummed, a familiar, almost comforting drone that had become the soundtrack to Daniel's life. Spreadsheets blurred, deadlines loomed, and the world outside these four walls felt like a distant, half-remembered dream. He'd spent years building this life, this career, brick by painstaking brick. He was Daniel, the senior analyst, the problem solver, the guy who always stayed late. But there was another Daniel, one who rarely saw the light of day in this corporate jungle. That was Daniel, the father. His son, Noah, was a whirlwind of energy and endless questions. He was 9 years old, with a mop of unruly brown hair and a mind that was always inventing, always exploring. Daniel loved him more than words could say, but a persistent guilt gnawed at him. He was a weekend father, a tired after-work father. He'd compartmentalized his life so thoroughly that the two Daniels barely knew each other. His colleagues knew about his Q3 projections, but did they know Noah had just won his first soccer game? They knew he could analyze market trends, but did they know he could also build a pretty impressive Lego spaceship? Probably not. He kept that part of himself locked away, believing it was the only way to be taken seriously, to succeed. The office culture was unspoken but clear. Work was paramount. Personal lives were footnotes, brief mentions in Monday morning small talk before diving back into the deep end. Talk of kids or family was often met with polite but vacant smiles. It was seen as a distraction, a vulnerability. And so Daniel played the game. He built walls around his heart, keeping the most precious part of his life, his son, a secret from the place where he spent most of his waking hours. The separation felt necessary, but it was also exhausting. He was living two different lives, and the strain was starting to show. One Tuesday afternoon, Victoria, the new head of his department, stopped by his desk. Victoria was different. She was sharp, driven, and had a reputation for getting results. But there was a warmth to her that was unusual in their cutthroat environment. She didn't just manage, she connected. Daniel tensed up, expecting a new assignment or a critique of his latest report. "Daniel, got a minute?" she asked, her voice calm and friendly. He nodded, gesturing to the empty chair beside his desk. He braced himself for the usual work talk. "I was just looking over the quarterly review," she started, but then her eyes caught a small, framed photo tucked behind his monitor. It was a picture of him and Noah at the beach, both grinning, covered in sand, with a lopsided sandcastle behind them. It was the one piece of his other life that had slipped into the office. He'd put it there on a whim, a small anchor to his real world. He felt a flush of embarrassment, expecting her to ignore it or make a quick, polite comment before moving on. Instead, she smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. "Is that your son?" Yeah," Daniel stammered, surprised. "That's Noah. He looks like he's got a great personality," she said, her gaze still on the photo. "How old is he?" "He's 9, Daniel replied, the words feeling foreign in the office air. He found himself relaxing, just a fraction. 9 is a great age. Full of ideas. She leaned back in the chair. "My daughter, Chloe, is 10. It's all about science experiments and friendship bracelets right now. What's Noah into?" The conversation was so unexpected, so normal. Daniel found himself opening up. Right now, it's all about his school project. He's building a model of the solar system. We've been spending weekends painting planets and figuring out how to make them orbit. It's a lot, he laughed, a real laugh that felt out of place among the keyboards and ringing phones. Victoria's eyes lit up. "Oh, the solar system project. Chloe did that last year. We nearly had a glitter-related disaster with Saturn's rings. She shared a story about trying to glue glitter onto a cardboard ring, ending with more glitter on her and the cat than on the planet." Daniel found himself laughing along, sharing his own story about a near miss with Jupiter and a can of orange paint. For 10 minutes, they weren't a boss and her subordinate. They were just two parents, trading stories, connecting over the shared, chaotic, beautiful experience of raising a child. There was no judgment in her eyes, no impatience to get back to business. Her interest was real. She wasn't just being polite. She was genuinely curious about his life, about Noah, When she finally did steer the conversation back to work, something had shifted. The air felt lighter. "Well, I won't keep you from your report," she said, standing up. "But hey, if you need any tips on how to suspend Mars without it crashing into Earth, let me know." "We learned the hard way." She gave him a knowing smile and walked away. Daniel sat there for a long moment, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. That short conversation had dismantled a belief he'd held for years, that his two worlds had to be separate. Victoria hadn't seen his fatherhood as a weakness or a distraction. She'd seen it as a part of him, a part worth knowing. She had a daughter, a life outside of her impressive title, and it didn't make her any less effective. In fact, it made her more human, more relatable. A thought, novel and startling, began to form in his mind. What if he didn't have to choose? What if the office Daniel and the father Daniel could be the same person? What if his experiences as a dad, his patience, his creativity in solving a Lego crisis, his ability to negotiate bedtime actually made him better at his job? He looked back at the photo of him and Noah. For the first time, he didn't see it as a hidden secret, but as a source of strength. He pictured a future where he could talk about Noah's soccer game in the break room without feeling like he was breaking some unwritten rule. A future where he could leave on time to make it to a school play without feeling a mountain of guilt. A future where his professional and personal worlds didn't just compete for his time and energy, but where they could coexist and maybe even enrich each other. That evening, when Daniel got home, he didn't immediately check his work email. Instead, he dropped his bag, went straight to Noah's room, and sat down on the floor amidst the half-painted planets and scattered craft supplies. "Dad, you're home early," Noah exclaimed, holding up a styrofoam ball painted a swirling blue and green. "Look, I finished Earth." "It looks amazing, buddy," Daniel said, his heart swelling. "You know, my boss, Victoria, her daughter built a solar system last year, too. She said we have to be careful with Saturn's rings." Noah's eyes widened. "Your boss knows about my project?" "Yeah, she does," Daniel said, a wide smile spreading across his face. "And she thought it was really cool." The streetlights outside cast long, dancing shadows across the living room floor. Victoria finally broke the heavy silence that had settled between them, a silence that felt louder than any argument. She looked at Daniel, his face etched with a familiar weariness, and knew it was time. "Do you remember that first morning we met?" she began, her voice soft but steady. "You were rushing out, looking like the weight of the world was on your shoulders. I stopped you to fix your tie. You probably thought it was forward of me, or just a random, kind gesture." She paused, gathering her thoughts, letting the memory hang in the air between them. "It wasn't random, Daniel. I fixed your tie because I recognized something in your eyes. It was the same look I saw in my father's eyes for years. It's the look of someone carrying invisible burdens, someone fighting battles no one else can see. It's the look of someone trying so hard to hold everything together, even when they feel like they're falling apart." Victoria's gaze was unwavering, filled with a profound empathy that cut through all his defenses. "When I saw you that morning, I didn't just see a handsome stranger in a rumpled suit. I saw a fellow traveler. I saw someone who understood what it meant to feel the pressure, to keep pushing forward even when you're exhausted, fixing your tie. It was my way of saying, I see you. I see the struggle, and you're not alone in it. It was my quiet way of offering a moment of care, a tiny bit of order in the middle of what felt like chaos." The room was still, the only sound the faint hum of the city outside. Daniel didn't move. He just watched her, his expression slowly shifting from guarded confusion to something softer, more open. He had replayed that first meeting 1,000 times in his mind, always wondering about the woman who had so confidently stepped into his frantic morning. He'd chalked it up to charm, to a fleeting moment of human connection. He never imagined it ran so deep. He finally let out a long, slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The practiced mask he wore every day, the one of composure and control, began to crumble. He didn't respond with a quick, impulsive remark or a charming deflection. For the first time, he let the raw honesty of the moment settle in. I never knew, he said, his voice raspy with emotion. I always thought. I don't know what I thought, but I never imagined that. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her, his eyes glistening. You were right. That morning, and so many mornings since, it's felt like I'm barely keeping my head above water. I've become so used to carrying it all by myself that I forgot what it felt like to have someone truly see me. Not the successful man, not the guy who has it all together, but just Don who is terrified of failing. In that quiet, late-night confession, the unspoken tension that had filled the space between them finally dissolved. It was replaced by a fragile, yet powerful, sense of understanding. It wasn't the fiery passion of a whirlwind romance, but something far more profound, more enduring. It was a connection forged not in perfect moments, but in shared vulnerability. Victoria moved closer, her presence a silent offering of support. We all have our invisible weights, Daniel, she whispered. The trick isn't pretending they don't exist. It's finding someone who is willing to help you carry them, even for just a moment. He reached out, his hand finding hers, their fingers lacing together. In that simple touch, a new chapter began, one grounded not in fantasy or pretense, but in the beautiful, messy truth of being human. They had found in each other a safe harbor, a place where their true selves could finally come to light. And in the quiet of that evening, they both knew this was just the beginning. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more content that explores the deeper connections in our lives. We'll see you in the next one. Have you ever felt like love should be a whirlwind, a sudden storm that sweeps you off your feet? We're often told stories of love at first sight, of instant, undeniable connections. But what if the most profound love stories aren't storms at all? What if they're more like a quiet dawn, slowly breaking over the horizon, painting the sky with colors you never knew existed? This is a story about a different kind of beginning. A careful beginning. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It's about two people moving forward slowly, deliberately, giving each other the space to breathe and the time to choose. Every step is taken with intention, every word is weighed with care. It's a connection built not on the shaky ground of impulse, but on the solid foundation of respect. Think about the small moments that define a relationship. A shared glance across a crowded room. A comfortable silence that says more than words ever could. In this story, the small moments are everything. They are the bricks and mortar of a love that is meant to last. It's a steady unfolding, like a flower opening its petals to the sun. Not all at once, but one by one, revealing its beauty in its own time. In this quiet dance, even the most mundane objects can become sacred. Imagine a simple tie. Something most of us see as just a piece of clothing, a requirement for a formal occasion. But here it becomes a symbol. It's a quiet ritual, a moment of connection. The act of tying it is no longer about necessity. It's a choice, a deliberate act of care. It's a physical reminder of the bond they share, a thread connecting two lives. This tie, this simple object, becomes a testament to their journey. It represents how something small, something human, something completely unexpected can change the entire trajectory of your life. It's a reminder that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It's in the quiet gestures, the patient understanding, the steady presence of someone who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to walk alongside you, one careful step at a time. Their story isn't about finding a missing piece to complete a puzzle. It's about two whole individuals choosing to build something new together. They aren't trying to fix each other or fill a void. Instead, they are celebrating each other's wholeness, creating a space where both can grow, both together and as individuals. This mutual respect is the air they breathe, the very essence of their connection. It's a love that empowers, not possesses. And so, their love story unfolds, not with the fiery drama of a Hollywood movie, but with the gentle, persistent strength of a river carving its path through stone. It's a testament to the beauty of patience, the power of choice, and the profound magic hidden in the ordinary. It teaches us that perhaps the most enduring love isn't the one that begins with a bang, but the one that builds day by day, moment by moment, into a quiet, unshakable certainty. A love that feels like coming home. Thank you for joining me on this reflection. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more thoughts on love, life, and the beauty of quiet beginnings. See you next time.